But I don't see how they're going to do it. No, I mean, they don't even have that many boats. All right, Winston. Okay. June 1st, 1940. It is a name that most of you know from movies or television, and it is in fact one of the most famous locations of the whole war. The main action there begins this week, Dunkirk. I'm Indy Neidell. This is World War II. Last week, the Allies decided they will end the Norway campaign and retire from Narvik, though the British completed their invasion of Iceland. General Zhang Zizhong was killed in action in China, and in the war in Western Europe, the Germans advanced for much of the week before being ordered to halt the 24th. Allied plans for a counterattack were scrapped, and there were hundreds of thousands of refugees in northern France. As this week begins, Calais surrenders to the Germans. The British begin to fall back towards Dunkirk, and evacuation is ordered, and the Belgian army is in dire straits. That day, the 26th, the patrol ship A4 arrives in Plymouth, with the last of the 40 tons of gold evacuated from Belgium. On the 28th, Belgian King Leopold agrees to surrender his army, but without consulting the Allies or his government, who are in Paris. This goes into effect at 11 a.m., and only by a desperate redeployment do the British and French manage to keep the Germans from reaching Newport and the Dunkirk beaches. The French and British are livid for not being consulted beforehand. But you know, it's not like they've been consulting the Belgians the past few weeks about military stuff. British Expeditionary Force Commander Lord Gort didn't tell them that he was pulling back to the coast, and the Belgians are angry themselves that they haven't recently gotten more military assistance. As Julian Jackson points out in The Fall of France, the German attack near Courtrai at the end of last week went across the British front, and those British troops, who had not been assigned to the then-planned counteroffensive, could have tried to attack the German flanks, but that didn't happen. The Belgians have also done what they were asked after the Ypres meeting last week and extended their line to aid the British. The attitudes of the French and British towards the Belgians have reached an all-time low by this point. There is some lingering resentment over Belgium's attitude during the Phoney War. There is some resentment over the Belgian failure to defend the Albert Canal. There is more, though, too. Henry Pownall, Chief of Staff of the BEF, has this to say about the idea of evacuating Belgians along with the British. We don't care a bugger what happens to the Belgians. When French Prime Minister Paul Reynaud hears of Leopold's surrender, he calls Leopold an abominable pig and says there has never been such a betrayal in history. But, you know, Belgian surrender cannot at all have come as any sort of surprise at this point to anyone on Earth. So why so much venom? Well, the Belgians may have been set up as scapegoats. This was the last occasion when the two allies could find themselves in agreement. Once Belgian betrayal had been exhausted as an excuse, they could only blame one another. But the British and French do work together on the evacuation. Eventually. Operation Dynamo, the code name for the evacuation of some 340,000 troops from Dunkirk, is in action all week. Vice Admiral Bertram Ramsay, Commander-in-Chief Dover, is in command. He directs the operation from the tunnels under Dover Castle and will be made Knight Commander of the Order of Bath for his efforts. I will say, straight off the bat, the evacuation from Dunkirk is a remarkable accomplishment, especially under constant attack from the Luftwaffe. That is clear. It is not, though, without its share of confusion and hiccups. The order is given at 6:45 a.m. the 26th. Reynaud comes to London later that day, and British Prime Minister Winston Churchill tells him about the decision to withdraw. Reynaud calls French Army Commander Maxime Weygand and tells him this decision. He does not specifically mention actually getting on boats and leaving, though, but multiple sources say it would be kind of hard for Weygand to misunderstand that. Whatever the case, it is not until the 29th that Weygand okays French evacuation. Well, on the 27th, German armor resumes its attack and tries to cut off the French and British around Lille. Most of them get away. Just 8,000 British have been evacuated so far from Dunkirk. On the 28th, some of the French First Army are holding out in Lille but are now cut off from the evacuating forces. 17,800 men have been evacuated. The British have lost one destroyer and some smaller ships. On the 29th, the Dunkirk perimeter contracts further. By day's end, most of the British and a lot of the French are in their evacuation positions. 47,310 men are evacuated. 3 destroyers are sunk, and the British Admiralty withdraws the more modern models of ships. Some French ships are now assisting, and some French are also being evacuated. Churchill tells Reynaud this day that he has instructed for Frenchmen to be included in the evacuation. But he hasn't said how many, and the British War Office has told Lord Gort that he should focus on the British, and he took that literally, even saying, every Frenchman embarked is at the cost of one Englishman. So even late in the week, not a whole lot of Frenchmen have been evacuated. Reynaud complains about this to Churchill the 31st, and Churchill says the evacuation will now proceed on equal terms, and that 3 British divisions will form a rear guard so that more French troops can make it out. Gort himself leaves that day from Dunkirk and tells the local French commander, Admiral Albrial, that those 3 divisions are to be put under French command. The British War Office, though, tells General Harold Alexander, the British commander now left in charge, to finish the evacuation as soon as possible and get all of the British out of there. So when Albrial asks for the 3 divisions, Alexander tells him he does not have orders to give them over, so the British do not form that rearguard. In case you are wondering, yes, this causes further strain in Anglo-French relations. On the 30th, the German Panzer forces begin to withdraw to the south for the next phase of their offensive operation. 53,823 men are evacuated this day. 1 French destroyer is sunk. Many of the smallest ships have been lost, though, and these are the ones that do most of the actual lifting from the beaches. Many of these ships are volunteers as well, offering their civilian service under heavy fire. The 31st is the most successful day of the evacuation. 68,014 men are taken to Britain. 1 destroyer is lost. There are air battles over the beaches, and the RAF claims 38 German planes shot down at a cost of 28 of their own. On the 1st, the Luftwaffe increases pressure on the evacuations. 64,429 men are evacuated today. But German planes sink 4 destroyers, damage 5, and also damage some of the Channel ferries and the smaller ships, which are kind of the backbone of the whole thing. The RAF counters with 8 patrols, but the British decide daytime evacuation is now too dangerous to continue. The Germans increase pressure on the ground as well, cracking the perimeter at Berge as the week comes to an end. The whole thing, though, even under constant attack, is going extremely well. This is partly possible because the British had begun assembling ships already the 19th, but also because of Hitler's order for the German troops moving up the coast to stop, as we saw last week. They were only 24 kilometers from Dunkirk at the time, so why would Hitler give such an order? Later on, he himself claims that it was to show goodwill to the British, to encourage them to negotiate with him. But that seems a pretty un-Hitler thing to do. There are several other possibilities. They could have been modifying the original Manstein plan, where instead of the army coming up the coast, smashing into the army in the north, it would be reversed, which would allow the coastal forces to prepare for the subsequent push southward once the surrounded Allied forces were finished off. Hitler could have thought, as many in German high command did, that they were advancing too fast and were still too vulnerable from the south. Indeed, the British attack at Arras last week, though small, had come as a shock since the British turned out to have better armor, and another such attack over the marshy ground around Dunkirk could prove fatal. It could also have been because of a phone call the 23rd, when Hermann Goering told Hitler the Luftwaffe alone could take care of the Dunkirk pocket, and Hitler went along with that. Whatever the case, it was 3 crucial days lost for the Germans and 3 crucial days gained for the Allies. But you know, this is not the only evacuation going on in Europe this week. Up in Norway on the 28th, the Allied naval bombardment of Narvik begins at 11:40 at night. The next morning, the Germans evacuate with French, Norwegian, and Polish forces all landing and attacking. The Germans retire along Basefjord. With the Norwegians coming from the north, the French from the west, and the Poles from the southwest, it seems like just a matter of time before the Germans will have to surrender. Another nighttime bombardment comes this week as well, in China. On the right bank of the Han River are 6 Chinese armies defending the Yichang region. On the night of the 31st, the Japanese still send 2 divisions to make a surprise crossing and move on Yichang, but one of them disobeys orders and bombards the Chinese, which costs the Japanese the element of surprise. Still, the Japanese manage to divide the Chinese and fight them in separate engagements, which enables them to push the Chinese back to the mountains to the west. And here are some notes to end the week. In Britain on the 26th, General John Dill becomes Chief of the British General Staff. His predecessor, Edmund Ironside, takes over as Commander of the Home Forces. On the 30th, in his cabinet, Winston Churchill wins a vote on continuing the war, despite vigorous opposition from Lord Halifax and Neville Chamberlain. On the 31st, measures are taken to counter possible fifth column or parachute attacks, like all direction signs are taken away from crossroads. And in Holland, Arthur Seyss-Inquart takes office as Reichskommissar the 29th. And the week ends with nighttime bombardments in China and Norway, the Belgian king giving in, and men by the hundreds of thousands being quickly evacuated from Dunkirk. A really colossal feat, you know? Under fire the whole time and still managing to pull it off, and pull it off smoothly for the most part. But colossal feats seem to be the order of the day. The Germans managed to break through in France and surround the Allies' northern armies with the speed of the Dunkirk evacuation. Nobody dreamed that would happen. Until May 1940, they thought they knew what modern war involved. But this is modern war. If you'd like to see some pre-modern war, check out the video I made about the Swedish Karelians based on Sabaton's song Karelian's Prayer on the Sabaton History channel right here in a second or two. Our TimeGhost Army member of the week is Samuel Sabita. Do like Sam and join the TimeGhost Army. It is the only thing that keeps the wheels rolling here. Subscribe, activate notifications. See you next time.